what she does, and what she does is writing, editing, and I'll let her take the floor.
I'm going to pass out a little handout. I'm going to take one as it goes around. So thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Sarah Gray, and I'm from Grey Editing LLC. And actually what I'm going to talk about today is how all of us in this room can improve ourselves as writers. And I know that everyone uses writing in our businesses in some way, even if it's just email. And there's no one in this room, myself included, who couldn't stand to improve themselves. Now, I've been writing and editing since my childhood. This is what I do. It's my calling. And I've been a full-time freelancer since the past summer. In the meantime, in the 10 years or so between that, I was in corporate America. I was mostly in project management jobs in a variety of industries, and during that time, I saw a lot of written communication, flurries of emails, letters, manuscripts of business books when I worked in business publishing. And I had a lot of chances to ask myself, why is business writing so bad? Why are the standards so low? Nobody seems to be able to communicate. And you even see people who are perfectly capable of decent writing. When they get into a business situation, suddenly they develop these strange habits that make their writing actually less clear and less useful. And that can actually cause all sorts of problems. Now, obviously, I'm a professional stickler, but it doesn't just bother people like me. Bad writing and miscommunications can actually damage your client relationships, delay your projects, and really cause long-term problems. But good writing, on the other hand, can actually open all sorts of doors for you. If you're a good writer, you can get yourself into and out of a lot of situations, and you can really clear up the fog so that whatever you're trying to say is actually going to get heard by the people who need to hear it. And good writing also is just so rare in the business world that if you're a good writer and you can communicate your ideas clearly, you're going to stand out from the crowd and people are going to notice you. So I'm going to offer a few simple tips of how you can take business writing problems and actually turn them around and improve yourself. So the first tip, and the most important thing, I think, is to keep it clear and keep it simple. You see a lot of puffed up writing in the business world. A lot of people feel like writing clearly kind of makes you unsophisticated. If you use as many buzzwords and as many formal terms as you can, that it's going to make you sound corporate. And that, in turn, is going to lead to promotions and investment opportunities. And I think we all know that that's really not the case at all. And sometimes people really just don't have anything that important to say. Maybe they don't have anything to say at all, and they're covering it up with a lot of words. There's a business blogger I read called David Silverman, who actually gives his students an exercise. So what I'm going to do is read you some businessese, and I'm going to ask you all to translate it into plain, simple English. Are you ready? All right. So here we go. It is the opinion of the group assembled for the purpose of determining a probability of the likelihood of the meteorological related results and outcome for the period encompassing the next working day that the odds of precipitation in the near term are positive and reasonably expected. Okay. Anybody, what did I just say?
It's likely to rain.
That's right. It's going to rain tomorrow. So how well did that actually communicate the point, right? And it's okay to use simple statements. It's okay to say, it's going to rain tomorrow. Maybe you should bring an umbrella. Business writers, and especially people who are writing business books, just love to throw in all these buzzwords and cliches. But actually, just vibrant images and concrete examples are going to get you much, much further and convey your ideas much better. Why use a meaningless generalization when you can actually draw your reader a clear picture of what you're talking about? And doing that is actually also going to cut down on the volume of your writing. Your emails are going to be shorter, they're going to be more to the point, and you're not going to be forcing your reader to wade through 5 paragraphs before they find out what you're actually talking about. And that's, for one thing, people will actually read your emails, and you're actually a lot less likely to have miscommunications. The thing about writing clearly, I think, is that you have to actually know what you're trying to say, and just say it. Just do that one simple thing, and you're really going to set yourself apart as someone who's more interested in getting things done than sounding self-important. So the next tip, and this is going to sound a little bit obvious, but it needs to be said, state the facts. When there's a lot of emails flying back and forth, when different people are working on a project, it's really easy to start assuming things. You start assuming that somebody knows about that conversation you had the other day with someone else, or that everybody's agreed on something. And that may not actually be the case. So assume nothing and spell it out. I actually recently, this is my success story. I recently worked with a business owner just this past week who was in a really delicate situation. She made a mistake, and when a crisis had occurred, she hadn't really communicated well with her stakeholders. So she had a lot of angry people who were trying to find out what was going on, and she hadn't really told them anything. They hadn't got the information they wanted, and so she wanted to apologize and explain what was happening and call a meeting so that she could talk to everyone. So she asked me to help her write her email and to smooth things over. And when she sent it to me, there were 3 paragraphs of heartfelt apologies, 2 sentences about what had happened and what was going to happen, and then a meeting request that didn't include a time or a place. She was so caught up in the emotions of what was happening that she forgot to include some really important information and to give people the thing that they wanted most, which was to know what was going on and what was going to happen next. So what we did was we figured out our priorities. Bring people into the loop, tell them what's going on. Here's what happened, here's what's going to happen, here's when and where I'd like to talk to you about it. And by the way, I'm really sorry about what happened, and here are 3 concrete things that I'm going to do better in the future to correct this problem. And she actually was able to smooth it over with the stakeholders. And I think, knowing what your reader is looking for and actually thinking about things from the reader's point of view is really important. So before you send that email, ask yourself, am I actually answering the question that this person asked me? Am I giving them the information that they need? If I were the person who's reading this, am I going to understand what's going on? And if you do that, if you go ahead and summarize things, you can save yourself a lot of grief and heartbreak. I do this all the time with my clients. Even if I feel like I'm repeating myself, it's okay to say, thank you, I'm going to email you 3 500-word articles about your product to you in Word 2010 format by 5 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow. Maybe some of that is obvious, maybe it's not, but it's always better to find out and to pay attention. And especially when we're all in a hurry, I think we're all kind of typing emails on our phones at red lights. It's just important to slow down, pay a little bit of attention, and reread the email that you're replying to. And just make sure that you're really saying what you think you're saying. And now I want to talk a little bit about style and grammar. We've all been to school, we all have varying levels of competency at this, and a lot of people had that English teacher who is scolding you all the time and you feel sort of intimidated by the whole thing, you don't want to deal with it. It's only email, but does it matter? And actually, it does matter for the sake of clarity. You don't have to be perfect all the time, but it really is worth your while if you want to be a better communicator to review the basics. And I'm just going to recommend a few books that are useful. If you just want to brush up on the basics of English grammar, Barron's puts out a great book called Business English that actually gives you some exercises to use. People may be familiar with Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. That's a classic that's in something like its 20th edition now. Tiny little book. It's actually got a great sense of humor. White is the guy who wrote Charlotte's Web, for those of you who remember that classic. So it's a great book. And if you're really serious about this stuff, you can get the Chicago Manual of Style. It's about that big, and will tell you the answers to questions you never imagined that you would have. A dictionary is also good to have. I use Merriam-Webster.com. It's free. You can actually sign up for the unabridged if you want to. It's $30 a year. And it's just a great resource to make sure that you're saying what you think you're saying. Now, related to that, and this is also important, is just checking your work. Just proofread something before you send it out. Take a moment to reread it before it goes out. Make sure you spell the client's name right. You won't believe how many people get that wrong. You didn't talk about Tuesday the 16th, and the 16th is a Wednesday. You didn't add a 0 to a dollar amount. Because if you wait until you hit send, you're going to be kicking yourself when you find that stupid error that could easily have been avoided. And related to that, do not trust your spell checker. I really can't emphasize that enough. Word is wrong all the time. But first of all, if you make a spelling mistake and that turns your word into another word which is a legitimate word, it's not going to catch it. I talked to a woman who wrote an important company-wide email, and she started it with the greeting, "Hell to all." So you can imagine she was kicking herself. Another thing to know about the grammar checker in Microsoft Word is that it doesn't do well with complex sentences. So if I say something like, the team from Philadelphia and the team from Boston are both staying at the hotel, it's actually going to try to change that R to is, because it's going to see, Philadelphia are staying. They're going to see the words that are right next to each other rather than parsing out all of the actual clauses and phrases that are in that sentence. So you need to actually brush up just enough so that you feel like you can use your own judgment and second guess Microsoft Word when it's steering you wrong, because it will. And of course, I've got to throw in my little sales pitch here, but if you feel like you're reading things over, but you just don't quite know what to look for, or you're still not confident in what you're doing, it's actually worth your time to hire a professional. And I'm not just saying that because I am one. And obviously, anything that's destined for publication should be looked over by a professional. But if this is a document that's important to you, if this is something that's going to change the course of your business, it's going to get you funding, that's going to the board of directors, it's really worth having somebody who knows what they're doing take a look at it, and it's more affordable than you think it might be. Now, on the subject of your reputation, this is something that comes up in the news more and more as people become more involved in social media and people like WikiLeaks leaking things. The thing I really want to stress to you about your digital communication, email is forever. It's forever. The internet is forever. Anything you put on the internet, assume that even if you delete it, somebody is going to be able to find it somewhere. And a rule of thumb, you may not be able to follow it literally, but a good rule of thumb to think about is don't type anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the New York Times. Now, obviously, you're going to work on proprietary things. Attorneys are going to have privileged communications with their clients. But you need to really think about what you're putting out there and how professional your demeanor is. I don't know how many people heard about this, but last year there was an incident where there was a group of climate scientists who got hacked. They were studying climate change and global warming, and they were sort of having this war with a group that was climate change deniers and wanted to discredit these scientists. And the deniers actually hacked into their server and found a listserv where they'd been talking about their research, both just general things and some problems with their research, and also they'd been venting their frustrations about this conflict with the climate change deniers. They'd been strategizing about how to deal with them, and they'd been making fun of them. And it was between friends, but it was things that you really wouldn't want to be publicized. And so this was hacked, and suddenly these emails are being quoted literally on the front page of the New York Times. They're being read aloud on NPR. Something someone deleted and forgot about years before, some offhand nasty little remark is suddenly widely publicized. So it's really, really worth your while to just take a moment and think about what you're saying and how someone might read it. Is somebody going to forward this? Is somebody going to read it over someone else's shoulder? If you're on a company server, is the IT department or the manager or the CEO going to take a look and see what's happening on your screen? Because all of those things are very real things that happen in every company. So it's important to do that. Don't write an email in anger. Write a draft in Word if you have to, and go back to it the next day when you've cooled down and look at it a little bit. Don't make fun of your boss. Just don't put anything in writing that might embarrass you or your company, because you never know how it might be used to represent you. And on that note, the permanence of email isn't always a bad thing. It's actually great to have a paper trail, and when you spell out things very clearly, it's nice to be able to go back and say, actually, you know what, we did talk about that on the 26th, and here's what you said, and here's what I said, and this is what we agreed on. So you can always go back and know exactly what happened. And finally, I just want to touch very quickly on the subject of international business writing. I know a lot of people in this room are doing some kind of international business, are working with people who are from different parts of the world. And of course, I think we all know that there are different kinds of English. If you're on a team with someone who's from India, and someone who's from Scotland, and someone who's from Zambia, and someone who's from Alabama, they're all speaking English. They may all be native speakers of English, and they may not understand a word one another says. So if you're working long-term with somebody who speaks a different variety of English than you do, for example, if you have a firm that you're outsourcing to in India, it's actually worth your while to just go to Wikipedia, read up on it a little bit, and make sure that you know what each other are talking about. I have a lot of clients in India, and I learned that in timing, we speak of timing as doing something at just the right moment. They speak of timing meaning your business hours. This is when you're open for the day. There are a lot of little things that we don't really think about, so it's worth your while to do the research and think twice, clarify if you need to. Another thing to keep in mind also, if you're communicating with non-native English speakers, or if you're communicating with someone in a way that might be translated, particularly if you're writing for translation, keep it simple and try not to use too many idioms. We often don't think about the analogies that we use. We use baseball analogies, we use basketball analogies, and it makes perfect sense to us, but it might not fly if you're speaking to people in a country where everyone plays soccer or cricket. And a lot of the business buzzwords, the cliches that I was talking about that we hear so much of, going forward and synergizing and so on, those don't translate well. There's no literal way to translate them, and because they don't have a lot of meaning in the first place, it's extremely difficult to put them into a meaningful phrase in another language. So just think about the terms that you're using as you're writing and try to be as clear as possible. And that can actually just avoid misunderstanding and make everybody's lives a whole lot easier. And that's what I want to end with, because I think that's really the takeaway from this. The clearer you write, just putting a little bit more thought than you're used to into keeping your writing clear and simple, whatever kind of business you're in, whatever form of writing you're using, it will actually not only make your life easier, but everyone that you're dealing with will appreciate it, and you will stand out from the crowd as a great communicator. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much. I didn't have time to go into basic questions of grammar and everything, but if people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I don't know how much time we have.